What's up guys, Mike here from the Losco. Welcome back to the shop. It's a Friday here, so not the busiest day of the week, but we do have plenty of stuff to do to kind of end out the week because we're closed on weekends. So we've just got some general housekeeping tasks in the back here, shipping orders, we just got some packaging materials in, and we also have some really cool bikes in the stand. So I'm gonna go join the mechanics, see what they're working on a little bit later, and I think that you guys are going to have a good time watching. We're actually gonna bleed a Shimano brake the very professional way with Alex. I actually talked to them to kind of plan out the filming, and I feel like I did not know how to bleed a Shimano brake until just a couple minutes ago. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna share a bunch of really helpful tips on how to bleed Shimano brakes because I know a lot of you watching have Shimanos. So let's go bug some people and see what they're up to on this Friday. Hey, looks like we got some boxes here. Steve.
Hey.
Is that correct that these are boxes?
These are boxes. Well, this is paper.
That's paper.
Yeah, this is a box.
So how often do we get like these pallets of boxes for shipping orders?
Oh, roughly once a month.
So this whole stack, these two stacks will last about 1 month.
Hopefully a little longer.
And what is that paper actually for?
Filling voids.
Filling voids. Oh, every time I have a void in my life, I definitely get a roll of paper too. Hey, it's Adam. What's up, dog?
Howdy.
What are you doing right now?
Picking some orders to ship out.
What you got there?
Some volume spacers.
Question.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to ship, and what is your least favorite thing to ship when it comes to like shoving them in boxes?
I used to hate shipping handlebars, but those have gotten better over time.
Is that because we have a better box size, or?
I just kind of learned how to box.
You cut them in half so that we can fit them in a box smaller?
Yeah, and then the customer puts them back together.
We just put some good in the box.
Some Flex Seal in there.
My favorite thing though, XT derailleur because it just fits into the box with no extra space. It's just nice and aesthetic.
It's like a baby in a crib.
If the crib was exactly baby size, yes.
All right, let's go in the repair shop and see what Alex and BJ are working on. BJ,
What up?
you got little stuff in your hands.
I got stuff.
What you working on?
Oh, well, right now I'm doing a air can service on a RockShox Super Deluxe.
Anything wrong with it, or just straight up service? Good old service.
You know, just kind of like a routine 50-hour service. Nothing too crazy going on. Everything was functioning appropriately. It's just a matter of kind of doing just kind of preventative maintenance. You know, there's a little bit of kind of grease and oil in here that can sometimes just get kind of gummed up a little bit. And so
What is this little slinky that you're holding?
I can never actually remember the appropriate term for these. Countermeasure spring. There we go.
Countermeasure spring.
Top out.
Top out. Okay, it's not a slinky.
It's not a slinky, unfortunately.
All right, and over here, we've got one heck of a setup going on in Alex's stand right now. It looks like you're doing a Shimano brake bleed, and I'm gonna have to say that to the average eye or home mechanic, looks a little crazy right now, and you're probably saying, I bleed Shimano brakes all the time. Why does my bike not look so crazily equipped like this in the repair stand? So Alex has been bleeding Shimano brakes for many years. How many Shimano brakes do you think you've bled?
Oh man, at least 1,000.
1,000? Dang.
Yes, yeah.
So I see a arm holding the grip steady, and that is connected to the frame so the bars can't move, and we've got the front end elevated, the rear down, and we've got a hose connected to the caliper going down into a bottle. And is this what you would consider gravity bleeding?
Yes, this is, yeah.
We got the front end up, and the fluid's gonna go down with gravity out of the caliper. And we also have a bleed cup, which you're probably used to seeing, and that is on the lever itself with a little bit of fluid in there. Okay, so Alex, why do you do a bleed like this with the hose down here compared to putting like a syringe on the caliper and kind of pushing the fluid up?
Well, the systems tend to get dirty from the bottom up. You know, all the dirt collects through the caliper and gets in that way. The lever's really sealed up, so that's the only place that things can get in. So flushing the fluid down and out is the best way to get rid of the dirtiest stuff first, and then less dirty at the top will flush, and then you'll continue to flush more clean.
Cool, so instead of pushing dirty fluid up from the caliper and then into the hose and all the way up to the lever, it's kind of counterintuitive. So when you're doing a bleed, you don't just want to get the air out, you also want to get fresh fluid in there too, right?
Yep, exactly. It's a flush and bleed, really.
Flush and bleed. So that is tip number one, is doing a top-down bleed. So we're going to be moving the fluid from the top at the lever down through the hose and out the caliper. That way you are not pushing dirty fluid from the caliper, which is the fluid that is most likely to be dirty, up into the hose, up into the lever. So yeah, tip number 1, top down bleed, gravity style, baby. So Alex, it kind of looks like right now you are flicking the lever a little bit and getting some air out of the cup before you actually open up the bleeder to gravity bleed it out.
Yes. Yeah, so I have just a tiny amount of fluid here because you want to just do a quick lever bleed to get the air out. Sometimes when you're doing that, it spits up a little bit of dirty fluid, so that's why you only have a little bit, as to not get a whole bucket full dirty. So
Sweet, so that's tip number 2, is to get the air out of the lever before you crack the bleeder. That way you aren't just introducing more unnecessary air into the hose and into the caliper, resulting in less work. All right, what are you doing right now with the lever? It looks like you're pushing the pistons, or?
yeah, kind of exposing the pistons a little bit. What that does is it opens up just kind of the volume of space behind each piston, and allows for any trapped bubbles to free up. You know, obviously if there's a tiny sliver of space, that bubble's gonna have a tendency to just hide in it and stay there and not get flushed out. So by opening that up, you can kind of open the flow of the fluid so that it actually does pass through everything and then out.
Gotcha. So you don't have to push them out all the way, but just a little bit, maybe 30% out or something like
Yeah,
that?
you just want to expose them, you know, a few millimeters. Basically, yeah, you don't want them all the way in. You know, that'll leave no space behind there, and probably no fluid will flow around it.
So that's tip number 2, have the pistons pushed out a little bit from the caliper, give you some room to play with so that there is less room for air to get stuck within the caliper body. All right, Alex, looks like you might be getting ready to actually do the bleed and crack the bleeder open, is that right?
Yes.
You just put some pink Kool-Aid in the lever?
Fill up the bucket with some fruit punch and open up the bleeder and turn remove the caliper from the frame.
Now, Alex is going to be moving on to the next tip, which is to remove the caliper from the frame and kind of flip it around.
Yeah, so, you know, air wants to float in all the fluid that it's in, pretty much. So the best way to get all the air out of the caliper is to raise the bleed port to the highest point so that everything will flow out and do its thing.
Doing his thing. So now you're just cracking open the bleeder.
Yep.
And then gravity will take its toll. And even though we can't really see it because the catch bucket is not totally clear.
Really dirty fluid coming out. It's a yellow hose, but it's still, you can still tell it's really dirty.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's definitely very dark coming through. And also, there's a bunch of bubbles coming out.
Even with it in the down. So that would suggest that there's tons of air hiding around. And the reason you want to start with it down in the lowest port position like this is because all this dark fluid is sediment that's been kind of dissolved into the fluid. So it's actually more dense than everything else, which is why it sits down here. So you want to literally put that at the lowest point so that it just drains out.
Sweet.
So you do that for a while until things are relatively clear. Kind of give a few pumps to the lever. You may see some more air, but we're not worried about air at this point. This is a flush first.
Cool.
So want to get the dirty stuff out.
And so that
we'll
is...
turn it over to let the fluid go, the flow go down through this side of the caliper.
Yeah, and if you don't do this, then it's definitely going to be kind of frustrating because there's going to be some air trapped in spaces that you think you are getting with it just in an upright position bolted to the frame, but that's not true.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that right?
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay, I'm questioning myself back here. So Alex just turned the caliper upright and is just flicking the lever a bit. And we definitely are seeing some bubbles coming out here and more dirty fluid. So right now you're not focusing as much on the flush as you initially did and more so on getting the actual air trapped out of there.
It's kind of a combo. Initially you want to do the flush because you just want to get the most dirty fluid out first, and then you can start to kind of bleed and flush simultaneously, and the fluid will slowly get more and more clear and pink like it should be.
And one thing to note is that with the caliper up, that's obviously promoting the air to go up this way and out of the caliper, but you also got to make sure that you don't suck air that way back in, since the air at the end of the hose wants to kind of potentially migrate up and make its way in. So Alex is currently just feathering the brake lever to ensure that the fluid isn't, pulling air back into the caliper from the bottom of the hose as well. So just keep an eye on that clear hose, and you can see where the air is coming from. Right now you can see it's coming out of the caliper, and that is a good thing. I don't know if you could tell on the camera, but it is definitely more and more clear as Alex is pushing it out. For reference, when I walked by this bike and I grabbed the brakes, because that's just what you do when you walk by a bike, they both pulled to the bar and definitely needed to bleed very bad. Like they almost felt like they had almost no braking power.
Almost out of fluid.
And always keep in mind too, when you are flicking the lever and introducing new fluid into the system, that the actual cup on the master cylinder does not get low, because if it does, you're just going to suck a whole bunch of air right down into the system and just kind of have to almost start from scratch. As you could see a second ago, Alex was looking over and just monitoring the level of the fluid in the cup. Alex has been bleeding the brake for maybe 5 minutes or so, and still getting lots of air out of the caliper. So this brake just had lots of air in the line and in the entire system. Right now is a good example how you can see you want to be careful with the lever so that you don't get air from the back side of the line right down here up back in there, because it does want to go upwards, and when you do release the lever it might suck some in. So just keep an eye on that and you should have no problem.
Yeah, some really slow pulses in the lever, and you can just kind of watch the bubbles float to the top and stay there while you're releasing the lever. If you go slow enough, then the bubbles won't retract back in. But you definitely want to give it some nice pulses while it's open like this, because those quick little kind of high-speed jolts to the fluid will help dislodge any air bubbles. It'll help agitate things.
Yeah, and I can see as Alex just very quickly flicks the lever, it's definitely pushing a bubble or two out almost every time. Now we are on to our last tip, which is to reassemble the rear end of the bike, but keep the cup on the lever with some fluid on there. So Alex has basically taken apart that entire gravity bleed setup and has bolted the caliper back to the frame, cleaned off any of the fluid that got on the caliper during bleeding, and also reinstalled the rear wheel with the rotor and pads and everything, but this cup is still on here. And what is the reason for doing that?
The reason we do that is so you set up the system kind of in the zero position. So you get everything set and the lever is filled with the caliper filled as well. So that's kind of the baseline, is pads and a rotor. So setting everything up around that is the best option.
And that's to ensure like there's the right amount of fluid in there for where the system sits with the pads?
Exactly, yeah. So as soon as you start to advance the pistons out, it'll pull very, very slightly of a vacuum on the bleed, and you could end up cavitating the fluid with a little less pressure than ideal.
Do you do that when you do any brake bleed, just not just Shimano's?
Yeah, so these, the fittings and the tools are Shimano specific, relatively speaking, but the principles are for every brake. So every time you open up the lever to do pads, you want to always do the top-down bleed. That's every brake. It's always going to get dirty from the bottom up, because those pistons are actively moving every time you pull your brake and actively pulling in contaminants.
And there's 4 big old seals in a 4-piston brake that have the opportunity for dirt and contaminants to get in. So it's just the most prone to getting contaminated. And for that fact, bleed from the top, down, lever, back, through the caliper, get all that dirty stuff out of there. Yeah, and then the last step is just get those pads set, flick the lever, and just get it to the point where it's, grabbing and you pumped up the system all the way, and then you just put that plunger in and remove the cup, and that's it.
Yep. You just want to start with the lever to get the air out, and then end with the lever to get the air out, and then close it off at the bottom first, and then finish with the lever.
Sweet. And then you're done. This did take it seemed like you were actually bleeding the air out of the brake for maybe 7 to 10 minutes. Do you feel like this one took above average, or is that about how long you could expect a gravity bleed to take?
This one was a little above average. It had a lot of air in the system. So there were lots of rotating back and forth with the caliper and being like, okay, it's still pushing air. So you just kind of want to get a good, 30 seconds to a minute of flow without air coming out to ensure that there isn't any still hiding. Because it does take some time between each bubble, so you want to make sure that it's a lot of fluid. And unfortunately, this one did take, maybe 6 or 8 ounces of fluid to get that to happen.
So it's definitely worth taking your time. Do it right, do it once, and if you get impatient, just remember it's going to take twice or 3 times as long if you have to do it again.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you for the tips, Alex. Nux. Last question, are there any other models of brakes that you would do this exact same procedure on?
Yes, TRP would be pretty much the exact same procedure because you'll use a very similar tooling setup with the cup and then a drain out the bottom.
Cool.
So.
Hopes?
Yeah, actually Hopes, because they do have that cool cup tool as well. So pretty much the same, just a different shaped reservoir, and you have to do a little different stuff with their open kind of moto style reservoir, as opposed to a closed system like this with just a plug.
All right, now that that's done, well, it's getting pretty late in the day. It's about 5 o'clock, and customers are starting to come pick up their bikes from repairs from the week, and we're all done shipping things. So now all that's left to do is finish up some video editing projects that I was working on earlier and start uploading the video from today that I just filmed right here. And that's pretty much it. Then we're going to close up shop. It's the weekend now. Saturday and Sunday looks like the weather's going to be actually pretty dang good, so probably going to get some riding in. Thank you so much for coming back to the shop. If you need any bike parts, let us know, thelostco.com. Call us, email us. See you next time.